Hello everyone, I know it's been a long time since I last posted a video, and for me what I've come to realize is having a YouTube channel is a lot like writing a book, especially fiction. Once you've said what you wanted to say, you're pretty much done. And then when you want to say something new, you post another video. So that's why I'm here. I've just published my second book. It's called The Primacy of Mercy in the Actualization of True Love. And it's been almost exactly 3 years since my first book, Dangers of the New Age, was published. And so I thought I'd share a little something as to how this book actually came about. So as most of you would have guessed, this is a book about marriage. And I guess I'll have to give a little background. But before I do that, let's sort of go back a few years, actually many years. This happened when I was about 7 or 8, and we were in summer vacation and had gone on this, to this carnival-like setting. There was a magic show and being performed by this really well-known magician of that time. The next thing I know I'm on stage, and I was petrified, of course, because I didn't know what to expect. All he told me was to look in the direction of his hands. That's what I did, and that's all I can remember. When I woke up, which was probably about 15-20 minutes later, I was told that I was hypnotized, laid on a cot, or what appeared to be a cot. The legs of the cot were removed, and I was floating in the air. So quite the magic for those days. Except that, most of my cousins were younger than me, and one of them actually thought I was dead. So, he was petrified and he was yelling and crying aloud. So what's the relevance of this story? The 4 legs are akin to the 4 pillars in our life: wealth, power, pleasure, and honor. All our lives we spend pursuing these 4 pillars. If we have them, we think we're okay, and if it's removed or if we don't have them anymore, we think we cannot carry on with our lives. As for me, the 4 pillars in my life were removed on 13th October 2012. My husband and I were living in the US at the time, and on that fateful day, he just upped and left. All I can remember is the first few days I was numb. I really didn't think I could carry on. I thought my life was over. It was one of the most defining moments of my life, and certainly the most traumatic. We had a fairly stable and very secure life. It's not that we were devoid of problems, but I was always hopeful for our marriage. I always thought that we'll be together, come what may, that we'll work it out. And yet here I was in a foreign country, all by myself, not knowing how I'm going to carry on. And to give you a little perspective, for me, my entire life was about my husband. He was pretty much the be-all and end-all of my life. If he was happy, I was happy. If he was sad, I was miserable. Archaic and old-fashioned as it may sound, and now I recognize that it's unhealthy, but when I look back, I guess there were several reasons for that. But the most important of them was the fact that I was always family-oriented. For me, it was always about family. And so when the rug was pulled from under my feet, my world came crashing down. And as in the case of most traumas, you tend to take on the shame. And that's what happened in my case as well. And so I remember distinctly that I shared with very few people, perhaps with a handful of people. My sister happened to be one of them. She was in India. And she was of enormous support to me, and I would have to say that the reason why I'm alive today is probably because of that support. And before long, I came back to India. I had to, I guess, because in the meantime, I had reached out to my husband several times, offering him forgiveness, letting him know that I want to be reconciled. But when he was stubborn and I realized that he's not going to come back to the marital home, I was pretty much left with no choice because I wasn't working at the time. So word got around, people found out, and everyone had pretty much the same solution to offer. And the reason why I use the word solution is because as human beings, we're so uncomfortable with suffering, our own as well as that of others. So we think we ought to offer solutions, and that's what happened. But the solution that was offered was pretty much the same. I was told, hey, listen, what's happened to you is unfair. You don't deserve this. You need to move on and find happiness in your life. And while the voices of the world were deafening, thankfully I didn't allow them to engulf me. Because by that time I knew that all the decisions in my life ought to be based on reason. Most of us, who are married, we know that life is not a bed of roses. It's not all hunky-dory. It's not about feelings and emotions. Love means to will the good of the other. Love is a decision. So I was very clear that every other decision that I took ought not to be based on feelings and emotions. And so I found myself a little over a year later in a 10 by 10 square foot room, a hostel room to be precise, in an institute for marriage and family, wanting to know the answers. It was not so much about the what and the why, rather it was about wanting to find out if in fact I'm on the right path. Because like I said, the voice of the world was exactly opposite, exactly contrary to the decision I had taken. Because in the interim, I had taken a decision that I would never get remarried. And so I wanted to find out, was I on the right path? Or was I in fact being foolish and stupid as the world was telling me? So I delved into scripture, I delved into what the saints had to say, I delved into what the philosophers had to say. I wanted to know, what is marriage? What is the significance of the vow that I took in sickness and in health, in good times and in bad times, till death do us apart? What did that mean? Was that love conditional as long as it suited me? What were the circumstances that, where it was okay to separate and divorce? Was lust one of them? So incidentally, to give you a little background without getting into too many details, the reason why my husband left was because his infidelities came to light, and when he got to know that I had just found out, he was too ashamed, full of guilt, and he left. So I wanted to know, was lust really unpardonable? And so like I said, I delved into research, and as one of the famous Catholic authors, Flannery O'Connor, once said, I write to discover what I know. That's pretty much what happened with me as well. The most joyful outcomes of this book for me was that I received validation for my decision. I didn't set out for it to be this, that way, because I was open, I was receptive. It was okay for me to be proven wrong, but that's not what happened. And the other joyful outcome was that I did finally find meaning in my life. Much as I was someone who was aware of the fact that the 4 pillars, wealth, power, pleasure and honor, would not fully satisfy me, I was a student of economics, and I had studied about the principle of diminishing marginal utility. I knew that the more wealth I get, the more pleasure I get, the more of it I need to fulfill or satisfy my previous levels of satisfaction, or what I thought were previous levels of happiness. I knew that. Intellectually I knew that. And much as I was further along in my spiritual journey, I guess I had two legs in two boats. I wasn't, fully there. I hadn't found meaning. And so, in the midst of what looked like a disaster, I finally found meaning in my life. This is not to negate the fact that I was going through an immense amount of pain, because as in the case of any trauma, you have to deal with the emotions. You cannot sweep them under the rug. You have to deal with the pain of abandonment, rejection. I had to make sense of my life 13 years into my marriage. Everything that I thought I had was stripped from me. I had to pick up the pieces of my life and make sense of it. But that's exactly what happened. In those dark days and nights, while I cried myself to sleep, God was in fact gracious to me. He helped me understand the purpose and meaning of everything that I was going through and everything that I went through. And so here I am, 10 years later, and wanting to let you know that I have survived. I have not just survived, I have finally found meaning. And for those who are at the crossroads of your life, not knowing what to do, or if you know of anyone who's at the crossroads, this is a book about hope. And of course, this is just a backdrop as to how the book actually came about. The book itself covers several facets, like, for example, what is God's purpose for marriage? Is lust the same as attraction? Are guilt and repentance the same? What is true love? Is it conditional? And is lust the worst possible sin? We know the hierarchy of sins, or at least we've heard of the 7 cardinal sins or the 7 deadly sins. Is lust in fact the worst? Because I've actually heard a lot of people, including celebrities, and when questioned, one of the common answers is, hey, there's a lot that I will accept in a relationship, but the one thing I can't accept is infidelity. I cannot accept it if my partner cheats on me. And these are not exactly very moral people. So I've often wondered to myself, why? Why is lust perceived to be the worst possible sin? Is it because the person who's hurt and wounded is in fact unable to pardon because one's ego is bruised at the very core? Because it throws up questions like, am I not good enough? Am I not worthy of love? So you have to work through all those painful emotions to be able to forgive. So yes, it's not easy. I'm cognizant of the fact that the path I've chosen is in fact the road less traveled. Heck, my own husband has told me on several occasions, why don't you get remarried and have children of your own? Because that's what the world does. So I've chosen to swim against the tide, but I have to say that in the midst of the darkness, I have in fact found truth, beauty and goodness. And I would certainly not take the credit for it, because I want to say to everyone out there who's in a similar situation, you may not get the help you think you need, but you will certainly have the grace once you've made a decision. So thank you so much. I have provided the link in the show notes as to how you can order this book. I hope you enjoy. Thank you.